Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. In my shop, I do all kinds of restoration work. I'm rebuilding all kinds of equipment, machinery, etc. Always having to make new and interesting parts. And occasionally through that process, I have the need to be able to do some heat treating, being able to harden or anneal metal. And to do that properly, you really need a heat treat oven. And the oven that I use is this Hot Shot 360 made by American Rotary. Now, first off, American Rotary is a sponsor of my channel, and we've had a long-term relationship with this company. They're an absolutely outstanding company located up in Wisconsin. Good American-made products, good American-made support. I use their phase converters, rotary phase converters, to power my three-phase equipment in my shop. They recently started making these Hot Shot ovens as well, and I have been using one now for several years in my shop, and I've been completely satisfied with it. And I say that because it's true and not because they're just a sponsor of my channel. I do want to talk a little bit today about this oven and just kind of some tips and tricks, do's and don'ts to do with heat treating ovens in general, and maybe a few specific things about the Hot Shot line that American Rotary has to offer. They offer this oven in two different sizes. They offer the Hot Shot 360, which is the one that I have here. This particular model on the inside, if you open it up, you've got a chamber in here that's 6 inches by 6 inches by 10 inches. And the 360 comes from, that's 360 cubic inches. They also offer a Hot Shot 1200. The Hot Shot 1200 model is 10 inches by 12 inches by 10 inches. So a little bit larger oven, capable of taking some larger parts. And for a lot of people, that's a really, really handy feature. The Hot Shot 360 requires a 20 amp single phase 120 volt outlet to run it, whereas the Hot Shot 1200 requires a 220 volt 20 amp single phase outlet to operate it. So let's get in here and talk a little bit about what is heat treating, why we do it, and some do's and don'ts for these ovens. So first off, what is heat treatment? Heat treatment is using heat to alter physically, sometimes chemically, the properties of some type of material. In metalworking, we typically use it for two different purposes: for either tempering, which is hardening a metal, or annealing, which is softening metal. We need to do that, for example, with a tool steel. In its hardened state, it's too hard to machine. We might need to anneal it to make it soft so that we can machine it. Once we machine it, we want to turn it back hard again, and we can go through that tempering process. And sometimes you do a combination of the two. You will harden it and then actually soften it a little bit, not completely, using some type of recipe for that particular material that you're using. Now, when I talk about recipes, these recipes are typically going to be, okay, you need to ramp up the temperature to a certain point over a certain period of time, maybe, you know, over for every thickness of the inch of thickness of the material, you need to ramp it up for this long, and it depends on the type of material you're using. So in tool steels, for example, there's many different types. There's like A2, which is an air hardening. There's O2, which is an oil hardening. There's all kinds of different steels that you can put in here and to very precisely harden. You need to know what material it is, and then you also need to have a recipe for that. Now, American Rotary on their website has recipes for the most common types of materials that you would be heat treating in here that you can actually program your oven to do. So, and I will put a link to where you can get those recipes down in the description before if you're interested in seeing what they are. So once you get a heat treat oven into your shop, one of the first things that you're going to need to do is find a suitable place to locate it. And there are a few things that you need to take into consideration here. First off, you need to put it on some type of material that is not combustible. In other words, you don't want to put this on a wooden workbench. It really doesn't have to be anything super special. I've just got it on top of a metal toolbox here, and this will be fine. There's actually little chance with this particular heat treat oven of catching anything on fire. When this thing is at 1800 degrees, you can come put your hand on it. It'll be warm, but it's not going to be super hot. But with that said, safety first. We want to just make sure that we're taking precautions. We don't want to put it on anything combustible. You also want to make sure you have room around that heat treat oven. And you need that for several reasons. Number one, you need a physical distance between something like this wooden wall that's behind me. Again, we don't want to risk the chance of causing a fire. According to the manual for the hotshot ovens, they recommend at least 3 inches all the way around it. I like to have at least a foot behind it, and at least 24 inches or 2 feet above it, go to the ceiling. Just make sure we have plenty of airflow and no real chance of this thing being able to catch on fire. Another thing is the height of this oven. Very often you're going to be loading and unloading this oven. Often you're unloading it with hot material coming out of it, going to some type of a quench for tempering. And because of that, you need to have it at a nice height. I recommend starting anywhere from about waist high up to about chest high. It just is really convenient to be able to get in there at a height, something like this, to work with this oven. You don't want to have it down too low. You don't want to have it up too high. Also, plenty of room around it for you to work. Because again, when you come in here and you're using a set of tongs or something to pull a piece of hot metal out of this to go quench, the last thing you need to be doing is tripping on something on the floor. It's just a safety hazard. We need to make sure that we have good open floor around it, plenty of room to move without any trip hazards or anything like that. Another key thing here is, we've already talked about keeping at least a 3-inch area around it. There are vents in different places on this oven. If you look inside, there's actually an air gap around this that allows air to move through there. There is a fan on the back that pulls air through. It is very important that we keep those vents open at all times so that that air can flow through there. And if you keep that space around the oven, you should be perfectly fine. The oven should also be located in a well-ventilated area. There is always the opportunity or possibility that you could get some type of off-gassing coming in this, some type of fume coming out of it, that you just need to have it in a good ventilated area. Most shops are probably adequately ventilated, but you really don't want to put this thing in any confined area. You don't want to put it in a closet or something crazy like that. You want to have plenty of good ventilation around it. There is an exhaust fan on the back. I will tell you, on that exhaust fan, when you turn the oven on, the fan will not automatically turn on. There is a thermostat inside the oven that will detect when the temperature gets up to a certain point. It will cycle on and off as it needs to keep that inside area cool enough so that you're not getting it too hot. Some people want to duct the heat from that fan outside of the shop. If you want to do that, that is perfectly acceptable, but you need to make sure that you have another fan inside that duct that is equal to the volume of air that this fan back here is pushing, to make sure that you are clearing that out. So don't just put a chimney on it or something like that and assume that you're going to be able to get enough draw. You need to put an actual fan on the outside of that area to pull that through. And finally, this again, something just common sense safety. Make sure you have a fire extinguisher close by. Again, the likelihood of you catching anything on fire from this oven is extremely, extremely low, but it's just good practice. You need to have a fire extinguisher in your shop anyway. You're actually much more likely to potentially cause a fire when you're doing your quenching, particularly if you got a oil hardening material and you're going into oil. If you spill the oil, it flashes off. It's definitely a possibility, so just keep a fire extinguisher close by just to be safe. Next thing I want to talk about is electrical requirements. Now, I'm specifically talking about the hotshot ovens right now. If you're using a different type model, you'll obviously need to look at what's required for that particular oven. With the hotshot 360, like I said at the beginning, it requires a 20 amp circuit, single phase, 110 volts. Now, if you'll notice, the plug on this looks a little bit different than your typical 110 volt outlet plug. You have one of the prongs going straight up and down, one of them is horizontal. This is a 20 amp plug. Most household appliances and stuff will use a 15 amp plug, which has 2 spades that are vertical. But if you look at an outlet, even in your home, very often you'll have some that has that little place over to the side, and that is for a 20 amp plug such as this. And it won't fit into a 15 amp receptacle. It will only fit into a 20 amp receptacle. If you have that plug in your home or in your shop, and assuming that your shop was properly wired, that means that it is connected to a 20 amp breaker, and you have the proper size wiring in your building to support the 20 amps that this thing could potentially carry. It's going to draw more than the 15 amps that a 15 amp outlet will do. If you don't have 20 amps, you probably need to see an electrician and get that properly installed. Most shops are going to have that anyway. On the Hotshot 1200s, they require a 20 amp outlet also, but it needs to be 220 volts. So that's a little bit more of a specialty thing. You may have to get a receptacle wired up unless you already have that in there. It is going to come with a twist lock plug for a 20 amp 220 volt circuit, and you will need to make sure you have the proper electrical stuff there to plug into. One very important thing though, always remember, do not plug these heat treat ovens up to an extension cord. You want to just plug them directly into the wall. Why? The vast majority of extension cords out there are not rated for 20 amps. They're rated for less than that. And when this thing is drawing at its maximum power, you can actually get that extension cord extremely hot and even sometimes cause a fire. So we recommend that you plug it directly into the wall. Do not use any extension cords. So when you get your Hotshot oven set up in your shop for the very first time, when this thing is brand spanking new, it's very important that before you do your first heat treat job, that you actually run this thing through a pre-cycle that it is set to do, that's going to do several things to this oven. Now, let me just say, first thing it's going to do is it is going to degas this oven. On the inside of this oven, there's lots of this ceramic insulation, and it has a lot of volatiles that are in there. When you heat it up to 1800 degrees, which is a common temperature that we might run at, a lot of this volatiles that are in here is going to escape. I'm going to warn you right now, it's going to smell. It's not going to smell good. I recommend again that you do this in a well-ventilated area, possibly even outside. If it's a nice pretty day, there's no chance of rain, that's probably a good idea, or maybe in a covered area outdoors that first time, because it is going to not smell very good. Do not do it in your living room of your house, or your wife will get very mad at you. Don't ask me how I know these things, but I do. Now, to run that first run, it is going to come pre-programmed. There is a controller on here we're going to talk about in a minute, but it's going to be programmed to actually do that first heat. It's going to heat it up to about 400 degrees. It's going to hold it there for a period of time, and it's going to ramp that temperature up to about 1800 degrees, and then it's going to cool it back down. This first run practice is going to take between 4 and 5 hours. Just plan on doing it. And I will say that you will keep the oven shut, of course, during the entire time. You may see some steam coming out of it. That's just any trapped moisture that's inside of there escaping. In some cases, you may even see some condensation down here at the feet. Nothing to worry about. It's completely normal on that first run. Again, just be aware that the cooling fan may not run the entire time. That is completely normal. There is a thermostat inside of this oven that will turn that fan on at the appropriate time when it's at the appropriate temperatures. But just because you turn the oven on, the fan does not automatically turn on. Just be aware of that. It's okay. After you do that first cycle and you get everything done, again, it's going to off-gas everything inside the oven. It is also going to kind of anneal the heating elements inside the oven. You want to heat it up and cool it down slow, and that will greatly improve the life of those heating elements inside of there. It'll make them a lot less brittle, where they're not as apt to break. So just keep that in mind. It's very important that you do that first run according to the program that's going to be in your oven. And there are instructions when you get it on how to get your particular module that you have over there, depending on which model you get, up and running. And after that first run, you may get a slight odor that comes out of it the next 2, maybe 3 times that you use it, but each time you use it, that odor will decrease, and eventually it's really not going to make any kind of smells unless there's something on the material that you're putting inside of it that starts to off-gas. At the time of recording this video in 2022, American Rotary offered 2 different options when it comes to the controllers that are in here. So the regular Hotshot models are going to come with this particular one that's in here now. This is a Novus 480D controller, and this is going to actually control your heat temperature. You can program it to go ramp up and go to the different cycles over certain periods of time for the particular recipes that you need. On their Pro models, that actually comes with a little bit different controller. I don't have one to show you, but it is a little bit more modern, nicer controller than the basic one we have here. The Pro models come with a Tap Pro controller that is actually touchscreen. It has a color monitor on it. It is Wi-Fi enabled. You can actually control it from your app, monitor it on the app on your phone. Really nice setup. This one here will do the job just fine. On this one right here, it will hold one program at a time. There is a USB port over here on the side that you can plug a computer in, and there is a computer program, a Windows-based program that you can actually connect to the controller here, program it from that, send it over. You can save programs on your computer and move them over here, but it'll only hold one program at a time. With the Pro model, you can basically save as many programs as you want and just pull them up as necessary. Again, a little bit easier to operate, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with this controller as well. I'll be honest with you, had the Pro controller been available when I got my oven, I probably would have gone with that option, but this one I've been using for quite some time. It works just fine. On this Novus controller, when you get it and you're ready to run that program, you will just power on your power here, and it's going to come through. It's got diversion. It's going to basically boot up, and it's going to tell you the temperature both inside the oven and then what it is programmed to be running. So right now it's actually not running a program, but as soon as we turn it on, it's going to want to ramp that temperature up to 100 degrees. Over here on the right side, you got a toggle switch. This is for heat enable. Right now, the coils inside are turned off. You can manually control this. When you get ready to start running your oven, of course, you want to enable your heat. You can manually turn this off when you're going inside the oven, if you're pulling parts out or you're opening up the door or something like that. There is a safety switch on the door that should disable the heat, but I still just like the manual option here. On this controller, to run your program, what you're going to do is hit the P button. It's going to say, you got a program here. We're going to say yes, we want to run our program that's in there. Right here on run, we're going to hit the up arrow, change that to yes. I hit program again, and you will notice that the bottom number, that's the target temperature that it's wanting to get to inside that oven. It is ramping up. I don't remember what program I've got in here, but it's going to ramp up to a higher temperature over a period of time. The top number is the actual temperature inside the oven. There is a thermocouple in there that is measuring that temperature, and once this thing kind of gets running, it's amazing how close these two numbers will stay to one another. This oven does a very good job of keeping that temperature very stable throughout the programs. I'm going to go ahead and disable my heat, and just kind of showing you guys this process here. I am going to turn that program off, and we'll go from there. You can completely program this module from the screen if you want to. You can go through menus. There are instructions on how to do that. You can create a program without hooking it up to your computer. I find it a lot easier to use the program that comes on my computer. Now that you got your oven in a good location, we've gone through the pre-process to get it degassed and to get it ready to go, to get those coils inside of it tempered and annealed. It is time to go ahead and start your first use of it. First thing you want to do before you load the oven is make sure that it is off. We don't want to be putting our hands, again, with the heat enable off and the power off. I know I'm completely safe. There's no chance of me getting hurt inside of this oven. As a general rule, I like to load my ovens cold. I like to put my parts in there while the oven is cool. I think that in most cases it is better to heat your part up slowly. Ramp your part that you're putting in the oven, your heat treating, ramp it up slowly with the oven rather than putting it into a hot oven where it's already going to be, it'll shock it. Sometimes that can cause problems. So I like to start them cool. So as an example, we're just going to put a casting in here. I do have a program where I do some stress relief on castings. This is a brand new casting I recently got back from a foundry, so I may want to do a stress relief process on it. I can put that into the oven. You want to try to center it in the oven to make sure you get good heat all the way around. You don't want to be touching your parts. Under no circumstances should touch the heating elements on the inside. That can cause things to short out, and you will get a really, really hot area right there. Again, it's best to put it in there kind of in the middle so that you get good even heat on all sides. When you get your part in there, go ahead, Shut your door. We got a nice latch here, latches it shut, seals it up good and tight. And then we can go over here and run the program like we were talking about a while ago. Another thing to be aware of, and also just good practice when you're doing heat treating, is be aware that you will have oxidation take place if you just put a part directly inside this oven. As it is heating up, it will come in contact with the oxygen in the environment inside the oven. And when it does, you're going to get that oxidation. It's going to form a type of scale on the outside of your part. And this can cause issues in some situations, particularly if you've got something that you want to bring out of the oven that you're not going to be grinding or doing any further machining to or something like that, where you'll be taking that scale off the outside. Now, we can mitigate a good bit of the scale problems that come from oxidation with using a couple of different practices. One real common practice is to wrap the part up in some of this stainless steel foil. This is just some stainless steel material. It's a little bit thicker than like tin foil. You would not want to use aluminum foil. It's going to melt at a low temperature. This stainless steel will hold it up. But you wrap your part up in it tightly, fold your corners up, seal it up real good. I usually put a little tiny strip of paper inside of that so that when it gets to the temperature that it'll start burning, it will burn that paper, and any oxygen that is inside this foil will be consumed as that paper burns away before it ever causes any problems on your part. Another very good option that you can do to control the atmosphere inside of your oven is that American Rotary actually sells an Argon kit that you can install in this. Basically, there's a tube that goes down through the top, and you can connect that up to a bottle of Argon like you would use with a TIG welding outfit. If you have a TIG welder in your shop, you probably have Argon already. That kit comes with what you need to put the tube in there. It comes with the tubing that goes to it. There's a little meter that will actually meter the argon into the chamber here at a very slow rate, but enough to keep the oxygen out. Basically, the argon is an inert gas. It will not react. You will not get the oxidation like you do with the oxygen that's in the environment. And by slowly flushing that through there, it keeps any oxidation from happening or greatly minimizes it. So the Argon kits are a really good option to be able, basically you're controlling the atmosphere inside the oven. It does not really interfere with the heat treat process, but keeps you from having to mess with the foil, which can sometimes be a little bit of a pain to have to deal with. I've actually got an Argon kit for mine. I haven't installed it yet, but I'm going to be doing that very soon and looking forward to being able to use the Argon on the inside of the oven. Typically, whenever you're doing a heat treat and you get to the end of your heat treatment process, there is some type of quench that has to be done to harden that material. If you've got a water hardening stuff, you would quench it in water. Some of it is quenched in oil. But the A2 like tool steels, you actually quench it in the air. You just let the air quench it. You take it out of the oven and let the cool air just cool it down. And that is adequate for a quench. But regardless of what quenching method you're doing, you're going to have to take the part out of the oven while it is hot in order to do that. And there are some safety things that we need to take into consideration. Now, first and foremost, anytime I'm working around the oven, or really anytime when I'm doing anything hot in the shop, such as welding or using the torch, make sure you're properly dressed for the occasion. Try to wear clothes that are 100% cotton. The cotton will not burn. If you have a nylon or polyester or something like that and it gets super hot, it will melt and it will stick to your skin, and when you pull it off, it's going to pull your skin off with it. Cotton typically is not going to melt like that. You can still burn yourself through cotton, but it is much less likely to cause problems. So wear 100% cotton when you're dealing with this type of stuff. Also, it goes without saying, wear long pants. You need to have on long sleeve shirts. You need to have yourself covered up as well as you can. I have a welding jacket that I usually put on whenever I'm coming over here pulling it out. Yeah, I can get a little bit hotter, but I'd rather do that than to get burnt. You also want to wear some type of good heavy duty gloves. I use, again, like a welding glove, and also eye protection. I wear eyeglasses that have safety glass in them, but when I'm dealing with the heat treat oven, I usually go over here and get one of these face shields and put on. And it's not so much about protecting my eyes with this. What's really nice is that when you open that oven and it's, say, really hot in there, 1800 degrees, 2000 degrees, you're going to have a lot of heat radiating out. Having on a face shield like this right here, if nothing else, it keeps that heat radiation from hitting your face, and it can really make a big difference. So I highly recommend wearing some type of face shield when you're dealing with that. So safety first. Also, some type of leather boots or shoes. You don't want to, again, be wearing a polyester or nylon or some type of material that will melt on your feet, because if you drop a part down there, I'd much rather it be hitting leather than hitting something that's going to melt through my shoe and stick to my foot. And again, it probably goes without saying, but as you're pulling that part out, you need to have some type of tongs. I've got some really long pliers that I can reach up in there that keeps my hand from having to go inside the oven. I'm reaching in there to grab it and pull it out, and I have something to hang onto that hot part with. Very important. And finally, now that we're through with our heat treating, what do we do with the oven when we're done? Well, it's pretty simple. Again, probably goes without saying, but turn it off. I always turn my heat enable off. It's just a safety feature. And then I'll turn the power off to the oven as well, anytime that I'm going to be walking away from it or leaving it or not using it for a period of time. Now, if it's going to be a while before I use it again, I will also typically unplug it from the wall. It's just, again, safety thing. Nobody can accidentally come by, flip on some switches and get this thing going. Not likely to happen, but always possible. And it'll also protect your controller from lightning strikes or anything like that. So if I'm not going to be using it for a period of time, just unplug it from the wall and be safe. Well, there we go. We have covered really the basics of using a heat treat oven in your shop, and whether it be a hot shot oven or any other kind, hopefully you have learned something about this. If you want more information on the hot shot ovens, I invite you to go take a look at their website at AmericanRotary.com. They also sell phase converters to make three-phase power in a shop using single-phase power, but they have a section on there on their heat treat ovens. You can look at all the options, get the specifications, find out more information about them, get pricing information, etc. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned something in the process. If you're not familiar with me and my channel over at VintageMachinery.org, I specialize in doing restoration work of all kinds of vintage machinery. I work with anything from machine tools, woodworking machinery, to steam engines, steam locomotives, you name it, antique farm equipment, whatever. I'm always bringing stuff into the shop, restoring it. We do a lot of machine shop work along the way. I try to teach you how to do stuff along the way, and I would encourage you to go check out the channel if you're not familiar, have not come and visited before, and we welcome you to do that as well. With that, guys, that will be a wrap. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Hit that like button if you liked what you saw here. If you want to get notifications when new videos are posted to my website or my channel here, hit that bell icon up there. That will send you a notification when new content is available. And guys, with that, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video.